Welcome to Fan Counters. My name's Nick.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And today on the show, we're going to learn about a new show. Well, it's new to me. It's been on for 4 seasons, and I didn't know anything about it. Have you heard about this show called Bosch?
I know of it,
Okay.
but I have not seen it.
Apparently, it's a big deal. They just got greenlit for season 5.
Nice.
So we're going to talk to one of the stars of the show today. Ingrid Rogers is here.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, I kind of have a funny story to share with you.
Okay.
She's not looking forward to this because she just sampled a piece of audio that I'm going to use to tell you about a funny story. I was over at my dad's the other day, and he's recovering from an injury, but he does like to listen to our podcast. He's probably the only person in my family who does listen to the podcast.
Right. He's actually come into the studio once to watch us tape one.
He was in love with Linda Gray.
Yes.
So he's sat here for the 2-hour show with Linda Gray. So anyway, I'm walking to his apartment and I'm hearing this show and I'm like, what are you listening to? And he's like, well, I'm listening to your show. And I was like, what? This is what it sounded like when he was playing it. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can get this to work.
You are, and I'm watching other people play video games. Do you do that?
Yes!
What
Isn't this
is
funny?
up with that?
Do you know-
I need that explained to me.
Doesn't that sound like somebody's either really drunk or...
Why am I talking so slow?
Exactly.
I'm a fast talker.
He is listening to it at half speed.
Because
He goes,
I do sound drunk.
I know, it's so funny. And actually, I sat and listened to this at half speed. It's we're way funnier when we sound drunk. Seriously.
So now start listening to our podcast at half speed, and it's a way better event.
It is. It's really funny. So, yeah, I walked into that. But he couldn't figure out how to get it to be normal speed again.
How did he get it to half speed in the first place?
There is a button on your podcast player, which you can also listen to it at like double speed. And some people listen to podcasts this way. I don't understand how you could listen to this.
I watch
Everywhere.
He does Geometry Dash a lot, and I watch him.
I like Geometry Dash.
Yeah, I watch him.
It's like, how would you listen to that?
Well, I
And-
suppose if you get used to that sound, it would be okay because it would be faster. I could do that hour podcast in a half an hour.
You could, yeah, but I couldn't.
But it's taking your father 2 hours to listen to our hour podcast.
Poor guy.
Oh
No
my
wonder he's
gosh.
bored.
Oh, it's a long day at home.
It is. Anyway, so I thought that was funny to share that because I didn't know you could do that until he got it stuck.
Right. Now
that
he's
speed.
listening regular, right?
I sure hope so.
Oh, golly, because that was painful to listen to.
I'm sorry I picked your clip out, but it was really funny with her like, and I don't know.
Right. Like, and then she couldn't think of anything, so the pregnant pause is like way longer than it needed to be.
Exactly. Oh, let's get in today's show.
All right.
Ingrid Rogers had a breakout role in the daytime drama All My Children, and she's now currently starring in Amazon's thrilling hit show Bosch. Ingrid Rogers has proven her career is on the rise with no sign of slowing down anytime soon. She's worked with directors Woody Allen and Joel Schumacher, co-starred alongside Al Pacino and Sean Penn in Carlito's Way.
You may also have seen Ingrid on Murder in the First, 2.5 Men, and The Cleaner. Today, we'll learn how a woman born in Canada and raised in Jamaica has found success in Hollywood while balancing raising a family and living a healthy lifestyle. Here is Ingrid Rogers.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fan Counters with Nick and Elizabeth on the Podfix Network.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours.
If I'm having dinner with my wife, don't sit down at my table. Don't follow me into the bathroom.
I continually will get stopped.
Can I take a picture? We're gonna. Oh my God!
I think this guy wants to fight me. Ended up being a fan.
I'm the only one that's ever been on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
That's why we call it Fan Counters.
I don't think you're going to last on the air very long.
So Ingrid Rogers, welcome to Fan Counters. We're glad you're here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Now, your name is made to be on screen. I mean, it sounds like a natural star's name. I love it.
Oh, that's so awesome. Thank you. I was actually named after Ingrid Bergman, and I was on a plane recently and watched Casablanca, and I was like, my gosh, she's amazing.
Isn't she?
So in our opening, we mentioned a lot of your career roles, and we're going to talk about some of them. But first, I thought we always kind of like to go back to the beginning and learn how you got into this whole acting thing. So you started acting in high school. But then you went to college at the University of Toronto for business. Were you trying to be practical with your major, or were there other things happening that might have influenced you?
Great question. Yes, there were other things happening that were influencing me, namely my father, who, I'd been a very good student all throughout high school, honor roll, and my dad is first generation going to college, and so really wanted me to have an education that was most important, and thought that I would be living, I think he quoted me the statistic of the number of actors who live below the poverty line. So it was really important for him that I go get an education, and that's how I was going to U of T, University of Toronto, and studying business to start with. And then was failing terribly and thought, darn it, I'm going to go do what I love.
So you decided in year 2 to move to New York and to attend the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, where you spent 2 years learning everything you could about acting and film techniques, and then another year acting in a company. Had you been to New York before you just decided to leave school and move there?
Yes. Okay, so let me tell you about that. When I was, I think, about 15, I went with my uncle and cousins to New York, and I just loved it. There was something from the moment I hit the concrete, I was like, this is the most incredible city in the world. Mm-hmm. The energy, the people, and I knew that someday I wanted to be there, live there, and just like soak it all up. So what happened was when I was at U of T, I was like, okay, this business, economics, accounting is just not working for me. And I switched without my dad knowing to the theater department. And I was there for about half a year, I guess. And then I got the courage. During that time, I learned about the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. And I remember taking the brochure to my dad and just saying, Dad, I really want to do this. And sort of laying out a plan of how financially I would contribute and why I really wanted to do it. And, God bless him, he was like, okay, if that's what you really want to do. He financially helped me, and that's where it all began, was at the American Academy in New York.
Were you scared to just pick up and move there and, to really give it a shot? Because I did read that your beginnings in New York, you were sleeping on the floor for a while, and just it wasn't ideal at all.
No, it wasn't ideal. It was especially not ideal, I think, because I was coming from such a cush, suburban, middle-class upbringing. And then suddenly here I was. Now, let me say that I went down with 2 friends, one I had known since high school and one I met at U of T. We all wanted to go to the same school, so we took the train down together. But we all stayed, I think all 3 of us started at the YMCA. So that was for a few weeks. And I just remember crying myself to sleep every single night because I was like, oh my God, what have I done? I'm away from home. I was so homesick. I'm in a communal bathroom that wasn't like so nice. And then from there, couple of us, actually all 3 of us, then became roommates in an apartment in Queens. So I had no furniture, nothing. And so for the first little while, yes, I slept on the floor. I had a little carpet that my girlfriends had given me when I was moving from Toronto, and I slept on that. And then, I got a futon, and then little things here and there, and life became a lot more comfortable after that.
Before you decided to do New York, a lot of actors might have just gone to Los Angeles and started doing auditioning and all of that kind of thing. Did that ever cross your mind to go that route? Or was the schooling so important to your dad that you knew that the only way he'd let you out, and was to continue that education?
Well, I think it was a little bit of both, in that Well, Los Angeles just seems so far away from where I grew up in Toronto.
Right.
At least New York, I was going to be on the same coast. I was close enough to Toronto. So there was some comfort in that for me. Plus, because I loved New York so much, it just seemed like the place I wanted to go. And the structure of, now the American Academy of Dramatic Arts also has a Los Angeles campus, but because it was proximity to Toronto and I loved it, that seemed like the obvious choice to me. And of course I was like super nervous to just pick up and go, but I'd always loved the city. I grew up in a suburb and I had always loved the city. Like my most fun thing to do on the weekends was to take the train from the suburb I grew up in and go into the city in Toronto. So that was always kind of my vibe, was a city vibe.
Okay.
And that I think was, more important than any of the nerves. It was like it was the beginning of an adventure. It was the beginning of life for me. And I was super excited to get going with that.
Did you have to work a job while you were going to school, or how were you making
extra? So I could only work on campus just for immigration reasons.
Oh.
And so I worked in the library at the American Academy, which I love because I'm one of those people that just loves libraries, and I've always loved them. There's something I love about the solitude of it, the silence of libraries, and I would work, and then I could also, watch all the old movies and start to read all the different plays and all the theater. They had a wonderful collection of just, the history of theater books and costume and stuff like that I could completely geek out on.
It's been called your breakout role, the Taylor Roxby Cannon on All My Children.
Yeah.
Did you have an agent at the time that booked this, or how did you find out about it?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate. I literally had been out of the academy for 2 months when I booked that role. The audition came. I was, at that time, let me see, I don't think I even had one specific agent yet. There was like I forget what we called it back then, but you could have more than one agent. It didn't have to be signed exclusively to any one agent back then. I don't think agencies still do that, but I got this audition through one of the agencies, and interestingly enough, I was so like, okay, I'm going to do life, and if this acting stuff works out, awesome. I remember I had a trip planned to go to Colorado when the callback was occurring, and I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not available.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, but I will say there was something in me that has always just trusted that if I'm right for a role, it's the right fit, it's going to be there. I've just somehow kept that point of view on things. So lo and behold, I went away for maybe 7 to 10 days. And when I came back, they still hadn't been able to cast the role. So I went in and I did the callback. I did the screen test or the chemistry test, whatever it was called back then. And then that was my first gig, was literally 2 months out of being in school.
And how long were you on that show?
3 years.
When you told your dad that you got that first role,
yeah,
what do you remember him saying to you?
You know what? I don't totally remember what he said. My dad's super low key. He's very cerebral, very intellectual. And I know he was proud of me. I remember that. But I will tell you this. What I remember most was when I saw the amount of money that I was going to be making in my first year. I don't remember rubbing it in my dad's face or anything, but I had that conscious thought of, wow, I'm actually making more money than my dad earns.
Wow.
In this first year of my career. Yeah. And there was a certain pride and knowing that, okay, I can do this. I don't have to be a statistic that lives below the poverty line. I can earn a living at it. So there was some sort of satisfaction, I guess, in that.
So it seems like the soap opera way of life, the production schedule is the craziest schedule because it's on 5 times a week. So looking back at that filming experiences versus what you've done recently on television and film, was it hard to learn your lines so fast and keep up with that really, really fast pace?
Yeah, it's literally like a moving train, and it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before because it was my first job. So I just remember being super like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But it's a muscle, and so I was diligent about it. I always wanted to show up prepared. I do think I formed some not so great habits, though, in terms of a technique, meaning that it became to me about learning words as opposed to concepts and thoughts, and knowing that there's acting is so much more than just the words.
Right.
But at that time, I was just literally trying to hold on to something on this rocket ride and go. But it was in so many ways just a wonderful training ground for me.
Well, I was wondering, do you think that fast pace kind of helped you looking back, now that you're doing slower shooting things like, movies and whatnot that go at a much slower pace? Did that help you refine your acting ability to succeed later on?
I think it helped me. I don't know if it was just so much the pace as it was necessarily just the professionalism of having to show up, be prepared, do your job, because no one was going to wait for me, to kind of figure it all out. So that sense of, and watching these really accomplished actors on the soap just do pages and pages and pages of scenes and do it in a really convincing, believable way, that I think was the best training that I had from doing the soap.
Now, that tape's in New York. So at what point did you end up in LA? Did you follow a role, or did you just decide I want to try something new?
I just honestly, so I had grown up, I was born in Toronto, but my first 9 years I grew up in Jamaica. So warm weather was always in my bones.
And it's not in New York.
Yeah, right. So it was super difficult at 9 going to such a cold climate in Toronto, and then obviously New York has a similar weather, so I was always longing for warm weather and palm trees, and I also had my son at that time, and life in New York, it's a grind, and I'd been there for many, many years at that point, and wanted just a simpler lifestyle to raise my son, and just for me too. So that was what really brought me out to Los Angeles more than anything. I think the fact that I could also do my job there was also a bonus.
And I'm not talking about weather climate, but was the climate of the business, did you find that to be different in LA versus New York?
Yeah, much. What seemed to me in New York just to be a much smaller, insular, close-knit community, just became literally and figuratively just this spread out, and the competition was so much more, and because I was coming into a space that I really didn't know at all, so it was really difficult and different for me to get acclimated in Los Angeles.
Now, amazingly enough, 1 year into All My Children, you were cast in Carlito's Way with Al Pacino and Sean Penn. I know you've talked about this hundreds of times. So hopefully I've got a couple new questions for you, but had you been auditioning for various roles at that same time? Or because you're already on a soap, I would be surprised if you were out looking for other jobs. So what was your time like, not only on the soap, but were you hunting for other jobs or doing commercials or anything like that at the same time?
Good question. I was still auditioning, not a lot, because there just wasn't that much time while I was on the soap at that point. Interestingly, I had tried doing commercials earlier on, and I just wasn't very good at them. Just wasn't my thing at that time. But occasionally I would, and it was usually film, because obviously I couldn't have done another TV show at the same time as the soap. So this was just one of those amazing, fortuitous moments where I got this opportunity to audition for Carlito's Way, and it worked out. And the producers on the soap were gracious enough to write me out of the show. In everyone's contract, there's usually a clause that you're given X amount of time to go do something else on a soap, because it's continual. Soaps are like back to back, so you'd never be able to do anything else for that 3-year period. But it doesn't always time out, that if you're offered a project, that they can actually write you out at that given time. And it was just in the stars for me that I was able to be written out at that time to go do Carlito's Way.
That sure makes writing a soap challenging. If you have to work around, guess what? She's not going to be here for, 3 weeks. So we have to...
She's going on vacation on the show.
Exactly. So it doesn't always work out,
Yeah.
They can't always accommodate actors in that way.
When you were auditioning for the role, did you know that you'd be vying, for a role to perform with these legendary stars?
No clue in the beginning.
Okay.
At all. No clue. I don't think, honestly, it was until I actually booked it that I was like, oh, let me really find out who Al Pacino is.
Oh.
Whoa, okay. Let me really find out who De Palma is. Whoa, okay. Sean, it was like that. It was just this, because I think I would have been even more freaked out had I really known the gravity of these people and how talented they were when I was auditioning. So that was probably for the best.
So were you starstruck when you went onto that set for the first time?
I don't know that I was starstruck. I've rarely been starstruck. I've been able to be pretty composed in that I'm able to see people just as being fellow actors, and we're going to create something together.
Okay.
But there are definitely those moments when I was on set when I was like, wow, this is pretty magical. And because it was my first movie, I was like, oh, I guess movies are just this magical. that's not always the case, So it was a pretty special experience.
So you'd been on All My Children for only a year versus all the decades of experience your co-stars had. Were you nervous about performing your scenes, and did you feel pressure to get it right the first time? Or tell me how you were feeling, kind of going up against these veterans who had much more experience.
It was, okay, I'll tell you one incident I had where Al Pacino very nicely said, "You're in my light."
Oh my gosh.
Nice.
Soaps are shot with 3 cameras, so it was a completely different setup where you're in these close-ups, and it was all just a really big learning curve for me. And both Al Pacino and Sean Penn were just super, inviting and welcoming, and understood that it was my first movie, and De Palma also. But yeah, there were definitely moments like that.
Now you've got an interesting credit on your IMDb page from around 1998, and the show is Cosby, which I'm assuming came after the Cosby Show. I wasn't familiar with the show, but Elizabeth said that she remembers it.
Yeah, didn't he play like a blue collar?
Yeah, exactly. It was very similar to the Cosby Show, but it was more of a blue collar as opposed to upper middle class family.
And they didn't have as many kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So did you have scenes with Bill Cosby and Felicia Rashad? Yeah. Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, I did. I think 3 episodes of that. What would you like to
Well,
know about
so
that?
what was it like to work with these TV pioneers? Now, I would picture that kind of to be a dream role, especially at the time. Was it as good as what we would be picturing? Was that experience, a positive one?
I had a wonderful, super positive experience on it. So much so that I remember Madeline Kahn giving me one of the most beautiful compliments I'd ever received on my work. She just said that I was really, I had a simplicity and subtlety to my work, but it was also very funny. And I thought coming from Madeline Kahn, that was like, whoa, it was amazing.
I'd forgotten she was on that show. Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember it now that you say it. Yeah.
Was that taped in front of a live studio audience?
Yes.
So how was that experience? And I know you've done it several times since and all that, but the first time that you had an audience watching you perform, was that a little bit more nerve-wracking knowing that all those eyes were on you live?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And because I wasn't a regular on the show, there's also that added pressure of I don't want to be the one to screw this up. So, yeah, it was. But they were also just so great. And I don't know if you remember Dougie Doug. I had a couple of scenes. So I went in to play like his love interest on it. And he was super fun. And I hadn't done a lot of comedy before that. And so they were really fun. I had a really, really great positive experience on that.
Obviously, Bill Cosby has certainly turned into be a controversial celebrity at this point, and you also worked with another controversial celebrity, Charlie Sheen. You did do an episode of 2.5 Men. Kind of wondering what your memories were on filming that episode.
Gosh, that was also, it's interesting. I've been really lucky that even if people have had controversy surrounding them on set, like on the day-to-day of shooting, it's never been an issue. It's never come up for me. And I feel really lucky not to have that kind of drama at the workplace, because I think that would be so unsettling.
Yeah.
To work in that kind of environment. So they, on set, they were completely professional. I can't say anything other than that, just super professional. So it's always outside of that, what people do in their personal lives is a whole other thing.
Not your business.
Yeah.
Just doing my thing here. Came to work, doing my job.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about your current show. It's featured on Amazon. It's called Bosch. Am I saying that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Embarrassingly enough, I'm sorry I haven't seen it yet. But you just had season 4 released back in April, and you've already been greenlit for season 5, which is totally cool. Did that come right away on that release, or was there some delay where you weren't sure?
The usual. It wasn't very long after we'd wrapped season 4 that it was announced that it was going to be picked up for season 5. If you're into police procedural dramas, it's super well done. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on it. It really is. And I came in in season 3, so all the seasons have been great. It's based on the Michael Connelly book series by the same name called Bosch.
Okay.
And
what character do you play?
Okay, so the lead character is Harry Bosch, who's played by Titus Welliver, and then his partner is Jamie Hector. J. Edgar is his character's name. He's played by Jamie Hector, who you might know from The Wire and a number of other amazing shows. And I play Jamie's ex-wife on the show, and the mother of his 2 kids.
Did I read that you rode along with the Beverly Hills Police Department to prepare for this role?
I did. It sort of came in the second season that I was on it, which is season 4.
Okay.
Not only, it's also because I go up for a lot of cops, and I have played many cops in the past. But I also wanted to understand what it was like to be married to a cop, because I hadn't really looked at it ever from that point of view.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like completely different, and it's like, wow, there is no such thing as a set schedule when you're married to a police officer, because their schedules are so unpredictable. And then also living with that day to day, is my partner actually going to come home or not?
Right.
That was also interesting, just to talk to some real life cops about that. And it was thrilling and so amazing. I highly recommend it.
To do a ride
if you
along?
have the opportunity. Yes, I really do. If that interests you and you have the opportunity, I just have such a greater appreciation now for law enforcement, what they do. And I think especially now in these times where they aren't always shown in the most favorable light, and there's a lot of controversy around it, it's good to actually go see for yourself what goes on day to day and what they're up against. And I found it super interesting.
Were there any kind of situations that, they encountered during the shift that you also got to encounter that stick out in your mind? Like what did you see out there? I mean, this is Beverly Hills, but
I know, you think Beverly Hills, what's going to go on
in
Beverly Hills? There was one call where I guess there was someone had called that the neighbor had a knife or something like that, and I guess this house had a party the night before, and maybe the police had already gone out there. So there had to have been at least 3 police cars that pulled up. I was in one of them. And what was most interesting about this, now it turned out that no one came to the door, so they couldn't find out what was going on. But a couple of the guys that were leaving were men of color. They were French, but still men of color.
Uh-huh.
And what was most interesting for me to observe was, right away the trigger is, you're just holding me because I'm black. And then how the officers had to respond to that. And they were being baited. The officers were being baited over and over and over and over. And I could see very easily how something like that could escalate into the awful scenarios that we see and have heard about on the news. So that was one to me where I was like, wow, it takes a tremendous amount of self-control on the part of the officers, and knowing how to diffuse the situation and how easily that could turn, like on a dime. That was one, and there was another situation where a couple was pulled over. It was a stolen car, and they had guns drawn on them, and how the 2 people in the car responded, they just listened to all the instructions. They got down. They didn't argue back. It turned out that their car had the stolen plates. So the criminal, so they weren't the actual criminals.
Uh-huh.
But had they not reacted in such like a what's the right word, just gone along with what the officers have asked them to do, that could easily have escalated into something else too. So it was really a learning experience on how to respond when you're pulled over by a cop, whether it's justified or unjustified. It's best to not ask questions, and then in the end, it gives the officers a moment to figure out what's going on and assess the situation. And then they were very respectful and said, "I'm sorry, this is what occurred, da da da." So that was my biggest takeaway from that.
For a couple of years, I was engaged to a cop, and had to and got to be that cop wife on the other end. And it's a very interesting thing, because we were living in Oklahoma at the time, and it's hotter than heck down there. And he would wear leather gloves all the time. And he said that the whole department wore them because you don't know when you're frisking someone, like what's in their pockets, or what, it could have been an open needle or anything. And so just like those stupid little nuances, and he, as a police officer in Oklahoma, was required to carry his gun at all times. And so we couldn't even go out to dinner without it being on, even if he wasn't even on duty. But you're right. People don't really understand that that's one of those professions like a nurse or a doctor where you can make all the plans you want. But if I'm in the middle of an arrest, I'm not going to make those reservations, or I'm not coming home until. And you sit there and go, well, are you not here because you're in the middle of an arrest? Are you not here because you're in a gutter somewhere? Are you not here because you're at the hospital? It's a very nerve-wracking position to be in, to be married to a spouse. So I'm curious to see this character because it is you're like always on pins and needles, and especially if you've got kids. How do you explain that to your kids, where dad is or why he hasn't come home or what the story is? Yeah, so it's a very interesting character.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is, in fact, in season 3 where there's a shooting and then J. Edgar, who's my son's father, he has to explain, what occurred. And it's a really beautiful scene that's done. But, yeah, it's a whole other dynamic when you have children and like you said, the nuances of that, it's just when you see that firsthand as an actor, then you're like, oh, I understand why that is, and that's something you can utilize just to make that character more real.
Yeah.
You mentioned this series is based on books. Do you know how closely it follows the book?
That's a great question, and I have yet to read any of the books.
Well, that's all right.
I have 2 of them sitting in my my big basket of books to read. I think, Michael Conley is very hands-on on the show. And so I would imagine that at least the character of Harry Bosch is quite close to what's been written. I would be surprised if it was that far off, yeah.
Okay. Now, for next season, if the writers were to ask you to draft an episode, what storyline would you give your character and her family?
That's a good one. J. Edgar and I we are divorced, but we are still co-parenting and sort of assessing or reassessing where our relationship is in season 4. I think it would be interesting. Like, what is it like then to have to? And I don't want to give away too much for people who haven't seen the earlier seasons, but I think it would be interesting to see where it went if LaTanya, my character, chose to date someone outside of J. Edgar. Like, what would that cause in the dynamic? And as she explores this new freedom that she has as a single mom, how does that affect the dynamic? Does it bring J. Edgar and her closer together? Or obviously, it would cause some conflict, but at the end of that conflict, would they be closer together at the end? I think that would be interesting. Now, bear in mind that this is not a relationship show like that. The bulk of the show is about the case that Harry Bosch is working on each season. So, I don't know. We'll see where they take this.
And so, no doubt, studios like Amazon and Netflix are changing the way we watch TV. So, kind of tell me how you feel the difference between, say, Netflix and Amazon versus how you was working for network television.
I really like the platforms like Amazon, Netflix, Hulu. I think Apple TV is coming out with their stuff. DirecTV has their stuff. There's just so many different platforms now, and I like it. I have a sort of a strange analogy for it, but personally, I like to shop at boutiques.
Okay.
Meaning, as opposed to big malls and sort of chain stores. That's just my personal preference. I find different things in boutiques. It's not as they're not as many choices, but they're more unique choices. And that's sort of how I feel about outlets like Hulu, Netflix, Amazon, and more of the cable channels, is that it's allowed for more unique shows and the freedom to create how you want to create as opposed to traditional network television. That's kind of the best way I found to look at it.
Okay, that's a good analogy.
Well, and I would agree with you. I think that the Netflix, Amazon shows are of another caliber. And I don't think that network TV is really keeping up with how good these shows are. That's just what I think.
Well, you don't have the same sort of censoring, do you? You have a little more
No.
lenience than the networks do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's more creative freedom and within the censoring and all of that. And, they're not beholden to sponsors. So their money is coming from subscribers, and that's, I think, what gives them the freedom to do what they want to do, much more so. I think it's going to be really interesting. It's already been interesting what's happened in the last 10, 15 years. So it's going to be interesting to see what the next 10 years brings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's been so many changes in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
Where are we going next?
I mean, I don't know enough about it to say, but there have been some interesting conversations I've overheard just in terms of, the money that's going to be pumped into things like even Fox now, what they're doing to try and keep up with people like Netflix and Amazon. But I don't know enough about it to honestly speak intelligently on it, so I won't.
That's okay. Well, let's talk a little personal details about your life, because you've got an interesting story that I really want to hear. I only read this, that you met your husband in Whole Foods, but for the people in the listening audience looking for their future significant other, how does this happen?
Oh, wow. If you live in Los Angeles, grocery stores are the best place to meet people. So let's see. I'll give you the abridged version of our story. It's a very sweet story. We were both there with our children. So my son was 3 at the time, and his son was 7. And the story goes from my husband that my stepson, Jake, told him to go and flirt with me. He thought I was pretty and told him to go flirt. So my husband did, and came over and just had a really nice conversation. My stepson said I was pretty, and I said, oh, thank you. And they went and sat. It was a Friday night, and which wasn't unusual for me to be there on a Friday night having dinner with my son. It was just like our place to go.
Okay.
And then they waited. They sat and played. My stepson was there with his friend, and they were playing Pokemon cards. And my husband deliberately stayed longer so with the chance that he could actually talk to me a little bit more. And then my son and I sat down at one of the booths, a few booths away from them. And my son really wanted to share his cheesies and go play Pokemon with his son and his friend. So I took him over and I introduced us formally. And the long and short of it is they played. My now husband and I talked. It turned out we lived like 2 minutes away.
Oh, wow.
From each other. And 2 months later, I was moving in, and we've been together for 16 years now.
Oh, my gosh.
So you have to be one to believe that things happen for a reason, because you've had so many things just kind of fall in place in your career, and now you're this personal situation.
You know what? It's very true. And I think a lot of it, though, is like, what do you believe? Like, I feel like there's something in me that kind of puts out these vibes, and then I kind of create these situations in life. And so I'm definitely a believer in, like, you meet who you need to meet and have the opportunities you have, you know?
Very
that's
true.
been very true from my experience.
So both of your boys now are young adults.
Yes.
And so you're not really having to parent on a day-to-day basis.
No, not like that anymore.
Well, how old are they now? I mean,
if you do the math,
I haven't done the math.
19 and 20, what, 3?
3.
Okay, all right, there you go.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. So it actually has afforded me more time now to be able to go back to my career more. Because for a little while in there, I did many. I was still acting all the time, and I did a lot of commercials, which were my bread and butter, because they were A, lucrative, but also B, I didn't have to be away from my family a lot then. I could just go do a shoot for a day or a couple of days away and then come back home. So that was the good part of that.
And you did a commercial with Heidi Klum, right?
I did.
How was that? Was that pretty fun? She seems like she's kind of crazy and, a fun person.
It totally was. It was for, what was that? It was for Diet Coke.
Okay.
And it was something to do with, like, I remember we were all in red dresses. That's all I remember. And it was something to do, I think, with women's heart health.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, like
exactly,
the Red Dress Day or something. Yeah.
Yeah. But yes, I have done many commercials in my career. Many commercials for many different products.
Well, early on, you said you weren't so comfortable with them. That must have changed now.
Frankly, I sucked at them. And then I just, honestly, I think it's once I had my son, I was like, okay, this will work really well for me. And I just started to get really good at them. The more you do it, it's sort of one of those things. The more I did it, the better I got at it. And it really served my lifestyle at the time. So I'm super grateful.
We also know that health is important to you. And I read that you keep an organic, gluten-free diet. Now, does your husband, Robert, also take part in that?
He does, pretty much. We both met at Whole Foods.
Well, so that tells you something right there. Yep.
We had that common interest to begin with. In the salad bar we met. So there's that.
Okay.
And yeah, it's just something that I was probably in my 20s. I just started getting, even as a teenager, I remember like reading something in a magazine about this diet or that diet, and I would want to try it. I grew up eating pretty health consciously. We didn't have a lot of junk food in our house. Like chocolate chip cookies might have been the worst of it. We never had like the fun cereals like Captain Crunch or Fruit Loops or anything like that. It was always like Corn Flakes or something
Raisin
bland.
Bran.
Cheerios. Yeah. You grew up like I did, where it was like, we don't need that sugar. And I used to just love when we'd go on a field trip because I would actually get to have like the 2-pack of Twinkies or Ho-Ho she'd pick up at the gas station because we would never get to have the whole box at home. Like we would just get that.
Never.
Or a soda
I would have to go
wrapped.
to a friend's house for that stuff.
Yeah. No. We didn't.
Totally.
Yeah, we didn't get to have any. We didn't even have potato chips in our house when we were growing up. That was just not. You just didn't do
were
that.
hardcore. I think we had potato chips because I remember in Canada you have the best sour cream and onion chips, and I remember having those. So.
From what brand? Do you remember?
Oh, Hostess. There was only one brand that was worth buying.
Potato chips?
It was amazing. Oh, yeah.
Really?
In Canada, yeah.
They don't make chips down here.
No, I've never heard of that.
They made. Where are you guys based?
We're in Wisconsin. We're in Milwaukee.
Right.
Oh, Wisconsin. Ah, yeah. Wait, do you guys have J's? Or
yeah, we do have
what do you guys
J's.
have?
And Lay's.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
Lay's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, if you're a potato chip fan and you ever go to Toronto, you must have ketchup chips. They are the best.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, no, Hostess is only a bakery here. Like just breads and buns and
Cupcakes
and Ho-Hos and Twinkies.
Yeah. But yeah, so I just had grown up pretty much eating healthily, and I just kept that. As a matter of fact, it's gotten progressively more so to where I am now, mostly organic, where I have like a piece of lettuce that's not, and or a banana, and I can totally tell the difference in taste. So,
what do you do when you're on set, though? Do you get some special meals, with these?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good question.
Because on my craft services often looks like some greasy stuff.
Looks like the buffet after a funeral.
Totally. Yeah, a lot of times I will bring my own food on set. I pack a little cooler, and I found that to be best. And then I will eat some of the prepared food if it's like, fish or something like that, or a vegetable. I won't be super like stringent about the whole organic thing, but given the option, I will always choose to eat something organic.
So our show is called Fan Counters, and so we love to hear stories of our people who have had encounters with their fans. So tell us about one or some that you can think of, whether they were funny or cute or spooky. We've had some really good ones, or some that are just weird. So tell us about some of your fan encounters.
Wow. Okay, let me see. I've had some weird and some lovely ones too. The most recent was on social media, which was kind of spooky, where I did a scene in season 4 of Bosch where I must have had my shoes off, and I literally like just did something with my foot. It was enough for this fan to catch their attention, and he totally commented on what beautiful feet I had, and I was like, wow.
That is weird.
It's kind of weird, and I know there are people out there that have foot fetishes, so God bless them, and I won't be twirling my foot anymore.
Yes,
Right.
Socks on at all times.
Totally. And let's see, what else? I've just had lovely, and the most lovely are just random on the street, just people saying, hey, I really enjoyed your work and blah. Especially when I'm back in New York, when I lived in New York, and when I was on the soap, I would get that a lot. And at that time, New York fans were huge. It's called their stories. It was their stories.
Yes.
So it was that was always lovely to get just that acknowledgement from fans on the street. It was sometimes a little, because I would take the subway a lot back then, too. It was a little concerning when someone would start to follow me out the subway and have a conversation. But that only really happened once or twice. Otherwise, it's just always been, and on social media now, too, mostly just really supportive, positive encouragement, which is really, really nice. I wish I had something like super fun to tell you about that, but that's about my fan encounters. Yeah.
Are you pretty active on social media, responding back to fans and that kind of thing? Are you fairly accessible?
I'm it's it's kind of like I'm just kind of outside of that generation of social media, but I'm getting more into it because I do think it's, especially Instagram, I like it in terms of posting pictures. So I know that to stay current, you got to stay with the times,
Yeah.
and this is the way of our world now, and it's a nice way to interact. And I do try to respond on Facebook and that to fans that have messaged me there or DM'd me on Instagram. I do like to respond to them.
Awesome.
It's such an accessible way now, especially on social media, for sure.
Yeah, accessible where you're not intimidated that something's going to go bad,
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
So we know that you have Bosch Season 5 coming up. Are there any other projects that you've got in the works that we can look forward to?
Well, I'm definitely on the hunt for the next gig. I'm also, I have a script that I've been working on with my husband. My husband's a pretty accomplished writer and executive producer, so I wrote a script, and we're developing that now. So I'm excited to see where we take that.
Like, is that a film or a TV series?
It's a TV series.
Okay.
It's a pilot script that we're working on. So more to come on that.
Very nice.
Okay.
Very cool. So where can we find you on social media?
I'm on all the platforms at the Ingrid Rogers.
Excellent.
Okay.
And mostly, as I said, I'm most active on Instagram, not so much on Twitter. or Facebook, but I'm there.
Okay.
All right.
Cool.
And you can also, on my website, I also respond a lot on my website, which is also theingridrogers.com. If you ever want to reach me there.
All right.
Awesome. Well, Ingrid, this has been a great hour. We really appreciate you joining us and telling some of your inside stories.
Yeah, thank you.
It was really my pleasure. Thank you both.
Our thanks to Ingrid Rogers for joining us on this week's show. If you're looking to find a significant other, it sounds like the salad bar at Whole Foods is the way to go.
Great. Now Whole Foods is going to... I'm sorry.
Are we playing this so that you're drunk like we talked about in the opening?
Apparently I'm laughing to myself. I just think all I can picture is this big stampede at Whole Foods of people just hanging around, because I don't go there very often because, I'm allergic to most of the Whole Foods. And so, but I have been there, and it has this little restaurant-y little sit-down section where you can literally eat your way through the store and, then go sit down and eat it. So it's a very interesting thing, but I suppose if you're the kind of person that eats organically or gluten-free or dairy-free or whatever it is, that is the place to be. And then you would like-minded people, because otherwise it's really hard to cook for people if they're not all on the same page.
Did I hear it right that the opening line was, "My son thinks you're pretty"?
Yes.
Okay, that works, guys.
Give it a shot.
Oh, man, I don't even know what to say anymore.
Well, all I can tell you is she sounds as good at social media as I am.
Yeah, I know. I was going to tell her that you didn't know what a Twitter was, but...
I know what a Twitter is. I just don't understand it. Isn't that the one that vanishes? Something vanishes.
No, it's Snapchat.
Snapchat.
That's the one.
So is Instagram going to be permanent?
Instagram is permanent. People used to think that it was their own personal photo album, but now, no, everybody can see it.
Yeah, because that's what I like about Facebook. If somebody posts a really good recipe, then I'll share it, because then I can just go back through my feed and find it. I don't know how to move them off of my Facebook feed, into some sort of recipe box or something. That would just be easier, but I don't want to print them all out, so they're just right there in my Facebook feed. And that I understand.
Works for you.
But I don't understand this. Twitter, isn't that the one where you get X amount of characters and you're just spouting crap off?
Twitter is, yeah.
You can't put pictures.
I don't know. I've seen pictures on Twitter. Yeah, you can put... I think if you link an article, the picture shows up. I don't know.
This hurts my head.
All right, let's not talk about this.
But you know what? If you'd like to get a hold of us, you can email me at hello@fancounters.com. I know how to use that one.
We are on the before mentioned Twitter and Instagram at Fan Counters Live. You can also catch us on Facebook. That's where a lot of our posts are. Now, if you're subscribed to us on Facebook and you're wondering why you haven't seen some of our posts, make sure you go and change the settings so it says "See Us First."
Yes.
Because then it'll always show up. But I just learned that. See, I'm learning too.
See, because it shows up in my Facebook feed.
Okay. If you're still listening, thank you. And we will see you next week.
Have a good week.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.